Hey everyone, welcome back to Cherelle Patterns, and today I am beyond thrilled to present to you my newly released pattern, which is the Harlowe Crossbody Bag. What can I say? Well, I'm gonna say this. Be prepared to be captivated, be prepared to rock this with style, and honestly, be prepared to be sick of me because we're gonna make this bag today. I love everything about the Harlowe. It is truly a work of art. It oozes elegance and sophistication. So really, let's just talk about what the Harlowe is all about. As you can see on the side, we have side buckle accent straps. You also have piping detailing throughout the gusset portion of the bag. Once we lift the stylish front flap out of the way, you will notice that there is a smaller slip pocket large enough to fit a few bills or a couple of your cards. And as we turn the bag around to the back side, there is an additional slip pocket, which is also convenient enough to hold your cellular device. Now, as we talk about the interior portion of the bag, you will notice that it is a drop and go type of situation. There are no recessed zippers. This is also a drop-in lining as well, and I have also included an additional storage compartment for your additional essentials, which will be a zippered compartment. And lastly, there is an adjustable crossbody strap, which you can lengthen to your desired comfort. And if you don't wish to do the crossbody, you can also go back to the traditional way of making a strap for a bag. So enough about this, let's get straight into the tutorial. We're going to go over the pattern pieces that are listed in the cut list in order, and if you haven't done so already, stabilize all of your respective pieces. You should have your flap and your front panel, and on the wrong side, they are both interfaced with Decoville light. Draw a 1-inch line from the top edge of your front panel. Next, you should have your front slip pocket, your back slip pocket, and your upper back panel. On the wrong side of your front slip pocket, as well as your upper back panel, they are both interfaced with Decoville light. Also draw your 1-inch line from the top edge of where the 1/2-inch seam allowance is. On the wrong side of your back slip pocket, it is not interfaced. There should be 2 exterior gusset pieces, which are mirrored, which means that one is opposite from the other. And on the wrong side, they are interfaced with Decoville light as well. And again, draw your 1-inch line along the side edges where the short ends are. We're going to move right along to the exterior contrast pieces. You should have 2 flap accent tabs as well as 2 strap connectors. And all 4 of these pieces are interfaced with Decoville light. These pattern pieces here are for the buckle straps that are located on the side of the bag. We're going to go over option A, and option A is for those individuals who wish to use edge coat, so the raw edges are exposed. So you should have 4 strap end tips, 2 of which are shorter. These are the 2 that will be cut on the fold. They are 3/8 of an inch shorter than the first main 2 pieces. And then you should have 4 buckle strap ends, 2 of which will also be shorter than the main 2. On the shorter pieces, they are fused or stabilized with Decoville light, and these are the only 2 pieces that should have the stabilizers on them. If you're going for option B, that is for the folded edges only, basically no raw edges, no edge coating. It's a quicker method. If that is you, then you need to cut 2 pieces for the strap end tips and 2 for the buckle strap end. And I will show you what that looks like for option B. That way you can make a better decision on which route you wish to go. So this is the strap end tip here. And as you can see on the side, there are no raw edges. Everything is folded to the wrong side of the fabric. So it has a more seamless look. It's still clean and professional. However, if you want to kick it up a notch and you want to have that more of a professional look, you can choose option A, which you will edge coat the raw edges. The same will apply for the buckle end here. And once again, no raw edges. Everything is folded towards the center, but you still have the same desired look. We're moving right along into the interior or the lining pieces. If you're using quilt cotton, they should be interfaced with cotton woven interfacing. Let's start first with the flap and the front panel lining pieces. Next, you should have your lower back panel and your gusset lining, followed by your back panel lining and your interior zipper pocket. And finally, you should have your front slip pocket lining as well as your back slip pocket lining. For the additional cuts, you should have 5 strap keepers. The reason that I have these in 2 different colors is because 2 of which will be for my crossbody strap only. The remaining 3 will be for the body of the bag. Next, you should have your front strap, your buckle strap end, 2 pieces for your crossbody strap, your piping strip. Lastly, you should have your binding strip for the trim around the front flap. We're now going to discuss the hardware. So you should have one 18mm magnetic snap, one logo, two 5 or 8mm rivets, 5 8 to 10mm rivets, two swivel hooks, which are 3/4 of an inch, as well as the buckles. Now for the buckles, you will need to either have the pin or the roller type. You cannot use the one that has a center bar because the pattern was not designed for that type of buckle. You should also have two D-rings, which are also 3/4 of an inch, one zipper pull, and one 7-inch zipper tape. I also forgot to mention that you will need your 3 foam welt cording pieces for your piping strips. In this next step, we are going to join the smaller pieces together. So let's grab the strap end tips. You will need the long and the short version. And on the wrong side of the shorter tip, the one that has a Decoville light, add a strip of DST, remove that paper, or you can use glue, and you just want to place these two pieces wrong sides together, matching them from end to the edge. You should have a 3/8 of an inch gap at each end. And once you're done, you will have both pieces that will look like this. This is for option A. So as we did in the last step, with the shorter pieces for the buckle strap end, add a strip of DST to the wrong side of the shorter strap. Also draw a 3/8 of an inch line from the one bottom edge of the longer strap. And this is just going to be your placement mark. So remove the paper from the DST, lay the shorter strap right at that line so that it's centered. We just want to make sure that these two pieces are centered together, and we're going to repeat the same for the second buckle end strap. And for the two strap connectors, the only reason that I added a small piece of fabric is just for stability. So you just want to glue or use DST to the wrong side of the smaller pieces and just center them on the wrong side of the strap connector. This is just to add stability when you add your D-ring and it's pulling on the purse. You don't want the fabric to rip or pull, so this is just for added security. Okay, let's put these aside for now. As we continue to prep our pieces, grab one of your piping strips and your foam welt cording. It doesn't matter which size. Just make sure that the cording is the same length as the piping strip itself. So take your foam welt cord and place that down the center, or in the center, and fold over your piping strip. And you're going to clip that into place. You're going to continue clipping as you move down towards the opposite end of your piping strip. After you're done, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to do a basting stitch. You're going to stitch as close as possible to the cording. You can use a narrow or zipper foot in this step. I would also recommend that you use a thread that is close to the color of your fabric so that you don't see the thread piercing through after we construct the bag. Also, do not start the stitch at the very beginning. I would say start about 1.5 inches down because we are going to trim away some of the cording on the inside. Repeat this step for the remaining 2 piping strips that you have. Okay, once you're done with all 3 of your piping strips, they should look like these here, and we are going to put them aside for now. If you wish to edge coat your front slip pocket for a more cleaner appearance, you can do that now and just edge coat around all 3 sides of the outer perimeter of the front slip pocket. We're moving right along into the straps and connectors. So for now, just gather your 2 strap connectors and your 2 D-rings. And on the wrong side, I just added a small strip of DST on one side or one end, and I'm just going to remove that paper backing and slide one of my D-rings through and just place the 2 pieces, matching them edge to edge, wrong sides together. And then you're going to repeat the same for the second strap connector. And then for now, we're going to put these aside because we will edge coat these momentarily. We're getting ready to top stitch our smaller pieces. So grab your flap accent tabs, your 2 buckle strap ends, and your strap end tips. And for the tips, what you're going to do is top stitch around all 3 sides for both pieces. For your buckle strap ends, you are just going to top stitch alongside each long edge. And then for the flap accent tabs, you're going to start and end with long thread tails, and you're going to top stitch around the entire perimeter for both pieces here. One thing I forgot to mention, and hopefully this helps, if you have trouble with consistent stitching when you go around the tips of your pieces, I like to draw a center line down the middle, and I will use that as a guide to pivot my needle or my foot as I continue top stitching around the pieces. That way I get that nice V shape at the ends of either my flap accent tabs or my strap end tips. Once you're done, all of your pieces should now be top stitched. If you wish to edge coat, now would be a good time to get that done, and that will also include the strap connectors. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to punch out your holes on the strap end tips. This next step is for option B only. Remember, this is just for the folded edges for the strap end tips and the buckle strap ends. Gather your pieces, and on the wrong side, draw a line down the center of each of those pieces. And then you're going to apply a strip of DST right down the center line or on either side of that center line. Once you've added the DST, we're going to fold the long edges towards the center. I've already done 3, so I'm just going to finish this last one here and just take the raw edges and fold it towards the center line. And we're going to do the same on the opposite end. So now all of your 4 pieces should resemble this here. Now that the raw edges are folded inwards, we're going to concentrate on just the buckle strap end for now. So let's put the strap tips away, and we'll come back to that later. So for the buckle strap ends, I would like for you to draw a 3/8 of an inch line from one bottom edge of the strap end, and you're going to repeat the same for the second piece. This is now going to be the bottom, and once we flip this over right side up, this is going to be the top. So I'm just going to orientate my straps towards the top, and once again, that mark is at the bottom. Grab your pattern piece LL and place that right on top of your strap end. And all we're going to do is trace the oblong shape or the slit right onto our fabric. And we're going to repeat the same for the second strap. All right. With your hole puncher, this is going to make it easier to cut out that slit. So place your hole puncher right at the top edge of the closed end of your slit and just punch that through. And then you're going to do the same on the opposite end. So you should have 2 holes at the top and bottom of that open slit. Now grab your ruler and your X-Acto knife, and you are going to line your ruler up right up against that line that you just drew. And you are basically going to cut from the opening of the first hole down to the second hole. Please do not go past the holes. We're just going to cut inside so we can eliminate the center fabric piece here. And once you're finished, this is what your buckle strap end should look like. And we are going to repeat the same for the remaining strap end. And if you have any lint or extra fabric that is peeping through the hole, just grab your lighter and just kind of singe that off a bit. And you can do that for each of the strap ends here. And that way you just have a nice clean appearance on the inside of the slit. We're going to put these aside for now, and let's grab the strap end tips. And we're going to use pattern piece J. Place your pattern piece on the right side of your fabric and just line that up with the bottom edge, and with your leather marking pen, you're just going to trace the outside edge of the tip here, and then don't forget to mark the hole, the punch hole for your buckle hardware. And then you're going to repeat the same step for the remaining strap. And once you are done, we are going to cut along the trace line here in order for us to form that nice curved edge. So just take your time while doing this, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but just so that you can see that visible curve. And then repeat this step again on the remaining strap tip. Now, if it helps, I also like to use my lighter and just kind of melt that fabric and mold that curve into place so I can get that nice curved edge. And after you are done, use your hole puncher and punch through that marked hole. All right, now let's gather our 4 pieces and we're going to top stitch. We're going to top stitch the long edges here for both of the buckle strap ends, and then we're going to top stitch around all 3 sides for the strap end tip. And once again, if you need help pivoting, just draw a center line so that you know where your pivot points are. We are finished top stitching the following pieces, and if you wish to edge coat just the tip of the strap, you may do so now. If not, we're going to put these aside and we're just going to work on the buckle strap ends. Now that we have both of the buckle strap ends in front of us, we are getting ready to add our strap keepers. This is going to be similar to step A, however the measurements will be slightly different. So let's flip these pieces over with the wrong side facing up, and with our ruler we're just going to measure 1.5 inches away from the bottom edge, and we are just going to draw a horizontal line, and we're going to repeat the same step for the second strap end and do that there. Next, let's grab both of our strap keepers and let's just put these 2 aside for now. Let's concentrate on this one here. We are going to add a thin line of glue right up underneath that line that we just drew, and with the wrong sides together, we're just going to line up the strap keeper right up against the line that we've made, and we're going to bring it around so that we can form a loop and place that right up against the butt of the opposite side of the strap keeper. So give that a firm press just to make sure it has adhered. And we have done one of our strap keepers for this buckle, for the buckle end strap. And of course, we want to repeat the same for the remaining strap end. So add that glue, wrong sides together for the strap keeper. Just center it right up against that line. Bring it around to form a loop and put them together side by side and just give it a nice press. And we now have 2 good looking buckle strap ends with these strap keepers. Now let's grab our buckle hardware, and I'm just going to put these 2 aside for now so we can just focus on one. And let me fix my buckle so that it is sitting the way that it should. So the tongue should be resting on the roller here. And we want the strap keeper to face away from the tongue. So let's take the top edge of the buckle strap and feed it through the buckle. And we want the tongue to slide through the slit. And we're just going to pull down and make sure it is seated properly. Now, wrong sides together. On the back side, the edge of the strap should be touching or right up against the 3/8 line that we've made. And we're going to clip that into place for now. Okay, so one of your buckles should look like this. Now we're going to repeat the same for the remaining strap. Okay, and once you've done that, we're going to clip that into place. All right, so now both of your buckles should resemble mine here, and we're going to go to the sewing machine where we're going to pull back the strap keeper, and we're going to stitch going across vertically from one end to the other, and we are going to repeat the same for the second strap. So let's do that now. Now that you have stitched your strap keeper onto the buckle strap end, we are just going to remove the clips and we are going to glue down the remaining free end of the strap. So grab your super glue or fabric glue, whichever you prefer, and we're just going to glue right up to that line. We're not going to go past it. We're just going to glue down here. That way we can stick these two pieces together and they are not going anywhere. And I'm going to do the same for the second strap, just gluing right up above the 3/8 line. So at this point, we should now be complete with option B. You should have your finished buckle end straps as well as your strap end tips. Let's put them aside for now. In this next step, we're going to work on the strap keepers. It doesn't matter if you're doing option A or option B. And on the wrong side, I want you to draw a center line down the middle. Next, add a strip of DST down the center on the wrong side of the strap keepers, and we're going to remove the paper backing, and I just want you to fold the raw edges towards the center. And we're going to do that for the remaining 4 pieces of the strap keepers. Your raw edges should now be folded towards the center line. Just a quick note, if you have thick fabric like I do here, as you can tell, my DST is not really helping much, so you might want to reinforce the wrong side with some glue because we want to make sure that these raw edges are laying down as flat as possible. Also, if you have a heavy-duty seam roller, you can also roll those seams down flat as well. But we're going to reinforce the strap keepers with a top stitch. So on the right side of all 5 of your strap keepers, we're going to stitch a 1/8 seam allowance lengthwise down each edge of all 5 of our strap keepers. Now that the edges are top stitched, let's put the strap keepers away for now. All right, we are now moving on to the flap section. So grab your front strap and your buckle strap in. On the wrong side, draw a center line lengthwise and apply a strip of DST on both pieces. And remove the paper backing, and we're going to fold the raw edges towards the center line. And we're going to repeat the same for the front strap. Now I'm going to give it a good press with my seam roller just to ensure that the edges do not stick up. And do the same for the front strap. So both of your pieces should now look like these two here. Now we're going to focus on the buckle strap end, which is the shorter strap. So let's put the front strap aside for now and grab pattern piece K. What you want to do is place it on the right side of your buckle strap end, and I'm going to clip this in place just so that it doesn't move, because we're going to trace the tip on both ends as well as the center slot here onto the right side of our fabric. So let's do that now and remove the template, and this is what you should have. So we've pretty much did this before. I am just going to cut around that trace line so that I can form that nice curved edge. And I'm going to do that on the other end, the opposite end as well. And if the curve is not perfect, I'm going to go back with the lighter and just make it a little bit better. I'm just going to shape it a little bit better by just burning the ends a bit. So you're going to do that on each side. And with your hole puncher, you're going to punch a hole at the top ends of, or the top and bottom end of that slit. So just punch a hole right at the top and one on the opposite end. So now you should have 2 holes at the top and bottom of that slit. Now with your ruler and your X-Acto knife, all we're going to do is place the ruler right up against that vertical line, and we're just going to cut out that center piece of fabric. So once again, do not go past the open holes. Do not go past the the holes. And then we're going to flip that around and cut the remaining section away. You can go back and clean this up, but this is what we're looking for here. And next we are going to top stitch. So we're going to start and end with long thread tails, and we're going to go around the entire perimeter of the buckle strap end. And once again, if you want to draw a center line at the tips here, just so you know where to pivot, you may do so, but let's go ahead and top stitch 1/8 of an inch around the entire perimeter of the buckle strap end. The buckle strap end is now top stitched. We're going to pull the long thread tails towards the wrong side of the strap, and we're going to tie them off and seal them with glue and trim the excess strings away. After you're done, we're going to grab our ruler and we're going to measure 2.5 inches from one bottom edge of the buckle strap end. And we are going to draw a vertical or horizontal line depending on your orientation. And next we're going to grab our super glue or whatever glue that you have, and we're just going to place a little bit of that right underneath that line that we just made. Now with your strap keeper, it needs to be the one that's 2.5 inches long. We're going to place the top edge right up against the line that we've made, and we're just going to press that down, wrong sides together by the way, and then we're going to bring that around to the opposite side and attach it to the opposite side of the buckle strap end. So both of the straps should now be touching each other right up underneath that line. And at this point, you have formed a loop. So this is what your buckle strap end should look like with the strap keeper. Grab your buckle and we're going to thread it through the buckle strap end. The strap keeper needs to be facing towards the opposite direction of the tongue. So what we're going to do is take the top edge or the top end of the strap and feed that through the buckle. And we're going to take the tongue and pull it through the opening. And with wrong sides together, we're going to match the bottom edge or tips of the buckle strap end, and we're just going to clip that into place. So pull up just a little bit on your buckle and it should be situated nice and perfect. Now that the buckle strap is wrong sides together, we're going to glue it in place. So I'm just going to turn it over so that the strap keeper is facing my direction, and I'm just going to get my super glue and just put that glue down that one end of the buckle strap just below the strap keeper. And then I'm going to press it in place and make sure it has a nice firm hold, and just press that down. And now we have one completed buckle strap end. With the front strap in front of you, grab pattern piece J, and we're going to place that on the right side of our fabric at one end of the strip. And all we're going to do is just trace the V onto our front strap. That is it. And we're just going to cut along that trace line. And once again, with your lighter, just smooth those edges out a bit. And what we're going to do next is place a strip of DST, just about 6 inches long, and we're going to start at the top flat edge of the front strap, like so. All right, so let's put this aside for now. Grab your flap and with your ruler, measure 3 5/8 away from one side edge of your flap. And you're going to draw a line at the top and bottom of your flap. And just make sure it's straight. Now retrieve your front strap and remove the paper backing. And we're going to place our front strap right up against our ruler so we can make sure it's nice and even and centered on the flap. So give that a good press. Next, let's orientate the flap with the tip facing away from us. And with your ruler, measure 7 1/4 inches down and we're going to draw a horizontal line going across the front strap only. And this is what it should look like at this point. We're going to the sewing machine next, and we're going to top stitch a portion of the front strap to the flap. So when we start, we're going to back stitch at the top edge, and we're going to sew down until we reach the line here, and we're going to leave long thread tails. And then on the opposite side, we're going to orientate the flap away from us, and we're going to start with long thread tails, and then we're going to top stitch along the side edge and back stitch on our way towards the back end of the flap. You should have your long thread tails towards the bottom end of your front strap. Let's turn the flap over to the wrong side, and we're going to pull those thread tails to the wrong side of the flap. You can tie them individually, or you can just tie both of the strings together as one. Now flip your front flap over, and we're going to finish top stitching around the lower perimeter of the front strap here. And the way that we're going to do that, we're going to fold the tip of the flap out of the way, and we're going to start and end with long thread tails, place our needle down in that first hole that we see here, and we're going to continue top stitching around the perimeter of the front strap, and we're going to end with long thread tails with our needle in the last hole on the opposite edge, or yes. And for my guide, I'm going to add my nice little center mark there just so I know where my pivot point is. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that now. Once you finish your top stitch, your flap should look like mine. Now we're going to pull the long thread tails to the wrong side of the flap, but first we need to pull them from underneath or in between the flap and the front strap here. And we're just going to pull that through and do the same for the opposite side. Now that our thread tails are underneath the front strap, I'm going to take my tapestry needle and just grab my 2 threads, and I'm just going to thread the threads through the hole. And I'm going to find that hole where that thread is exposed here, and I'm just going to feed it through so that I can collect the threads on the wrong side of the flap, and just pull that through. And then I'm going to repeat the same for the other side. Once your threads are to the wrong side, you want to give it a nice little tug just to make sure that we don't have any loose threads underneath. And we're going to add a little bit of glue and tie our threads to the rear and trim away the remaining thread tails. So now we're going to flip over the front flap, and we're going to punch a hole for our buckle placement. Now orientate your flap with the tip facing away from you, and we're going to measure 7 5/8 of an inch away from the top edge of the flap, and we're just going to draw a line here, and that's going to be our placement mark so that we can punch our hole for the buckle. And with your leather hole puncher, you're just going to find a nice center placement to punch your hole through, and we're punching right at that line. All right, and so it should look like this. Now let's grab your buckle strap end, and we're going to feed the front strap through the buckle only for the tongue to go through the hole. And we want to make sure that it is seated nicely. So we don't want the buckle to sit high. We want a nice placement. And if you want to make sure that the tips match from from the bottom edge, then just pull the strap through the strap keeper and make a small adjustment so that everything is matching at the end. So if you are comfortable with that placement, just pull back the strap and clip the buckle end to the flap here. Make sure everything is centered, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine. We're going to pull back this strap keeper so that we can expose the top portion of the buckle strap end, and we're going to stitch a vertical line. You can use a narrow or a zipper foot, and we're going to stitch through all the layers of the fabric. And then you're going to make another or a second stitch 1/4 inch away from the first stitch. Okay, now we don't want to stitch too close to the bottom edge of the flap, because when we add the binding, we have to move this out of the way so that we can get underneath and continue stitching going across the other side. So just keep that in mind. So try not to stitch too close to the bottom edge. 1/4 inch away from the first stitch is good enough. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that now. Now that we have attached a buckle strap into the flap, you should have 2 rows of stitching, one underneath the strap keeper as well as one 1/4 inch away from the first stitch. And we need to glue the free end of the front strap to the buckle strap in. So with your glue, add glue to just below the second stitch, and we just want to glue that all the way down, or apply glue all the way down, and feed our front strap through the strap keeper. And we are going to place that right on top, making sure that our edges, they sit together perfectly, as well as the end, so all the edges should match from side to the bottom. And once you're done gluing the 2 pieces together, if you have fabric that is sticking out or you need to reshape your curved edge, you can just grab your scissors and just make those small corrections if need be. And with your lighter, you can also burn the edge. Just be careful not to ruin your fabric, but just melt that down a bit so that you can form that nice curve. Okay, so we can put this aside for now because we're going to work on the lining portion of the flap. With your flap lining, we're going to turn it over with the wrong side facing up. If you haven't done so already, make your placement mark for your magnetic snap. Now, I highly recommend that you use some type of reinforcement stabilizer for the snap, because the flap is going to get a lot of wear and tear, and we don't want to weaken the snap over time. So it's best to put either Decoville Heavy, which I have here, or you can double up on Decoville Light and just adhere that to the wrong side of the flap. Now I'm going to grab my washer and place the center hole right at that placement mark. And with my pen, I am going to trace inside the slits here and just draw a line. And with my X-Acto knife, I'm just going to cut from the top and bottom of those 2 lines that I've just made. Grab your male washer, and the way that you can determine which one is female or male, the male has the nipple that sticks out. So we're going to install the washer on the right side of our fabric. So find those 2 slits that you just made, and we're just going to push the prongs through. Then let's add the washer right through the prongs. And I like to push mine inward, because over time, if you press them outwards, they're going to bend. We want to make sure that it does not have any type of room to move. So if you have a hammer or something to press those inwards, you can do that. And that way you know that your snap is not going anywhere. So on the right side, you should now have your installed magnetic snap. Now we're going to put our flap pieces together. So grab your exterior flap and turn it over right side facing up. And we are going to lay the lining wrong sides together. And just make sure that you align them properly from edge to edge. And we're going to clip that in place. And I'm just going to turn it over to make it easier on myself. And we will clip the lining to our flap here. Then we're going to go to the sewing machine and attach the lining to the flap exterior, and we're going to base stitch around the entire perimeter of the flap. Now that we have basted the lining to the flap exterior, we're going to orientate the flap so that the top edge is facing away from us. And go ahead and make your placement lines on each side edge of your flap exterior. And retrieve your binding strip. On the wrong side, mark your center line lengthwise from one end to the other. And we're going to add a strip of DST down the center of that line. And I'm using a 1/2 inch DST. What we want to do is carefully attach the binding around the outer edge. And if you notice, we have a lot of distinct curves along the bottom edge and slightly towards the top edge of the flap. So this is going to be the trick, and this is one of the reasons why when it comes to the type of material that you're using, it needs to be very flexible and not stiff. So we're just going to peel a portion of the paper backing off of the binding strip here, and where your center line is, you are going to align the edge of your flap right at that line, and you're going to start at your 1/2 inch mark here at one top edge. So we're just going to carefully place that around the edge of the flap and just keep going around. And you can, on the bottom here, if you can see, I'm just going to kind of push that into the lining back there, and we're just going to come around the edge. So don't do anything at this point, because we're going to work with the edge after we get the binding strip on to the flap. So just keep going, and we're going to rotate the flap and just make sure the edge is right up against your center line. So do that until you reach the opposite end of your flap. Now once you have reached the opposite end of your flap, we're going to trim away the remaining binding strip here, just right at that line. Okay. So now let's flip it over to the wrong side, and we're just going to push the top edge down a bit. Okay, now back to the front of the flap. This is where we're going to have to start working the binding. So fold over the remaining edge of the binding strip and just keep working that along. And if it helps, you can clip down with the binding as you work around your flap to keep it in place. And we're going to keep doing that. And if you notice that there's some unevenness there, because what we don't want a thick line, because when we get ready to top stitch, we want to make sure that we catch the bottom of the binding strip. So we want to make sure that the thread goes through the binding, not off onto the lining piece. So we want to keep the seam up here consistent. So just make sure that it just looks even as we work around the flap. So I'm going to continue working with this, and then when we get to, well, actually I'm almost there now, but once we get to the edge, you're just going to push that in. And for now, it's okay if you have a little bit of the wrinkling here, the puckering, that's okay. We'll work with that as we move along. So let's just work around the flap for now, and then we'll come back and clean it up once we're done. I'm going to go around and just inspect and make sure everything looks even on the front and the back. If the edges are a little bit short around here, you know, for example, it's not consistent with the thickness, I'm just going to lift that up a bit and just kind of tug on the fabric so I can make sure that it is completely folded over the edge of the corners of the flap. And I'm just going to keep working that. All right. If you have some puckering here, it might help to add a little bit of glue underneath the wrong side of the binding and just stick that down to the flap. Honestly, in my opinion, I do like a little bit of the wrinkling. It just adds a little more personality to the flap. But again, personal preference. If you want a smooth binding, then just work out those kinks there around the corner edge. Once we get to the sewing machine, we are going to sew a scant 1/4 inch top stitch. I'm using a 1/4 inch foot, so that's going to help me with the edge here, but we're not going to do 1/8 of an inch, we're going to do 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to start from the top edge and work our way around the perimeter. Remember to lift the front strap out of the way to get underneath, and we're going to continue going up towards the top edge on the opposite side, and make sure you back stitch at the beginning and end. Now if you use DST and it's a bit sticky, I'm going to give you my little trick that I use, and it works perfect every time. So here's my little secret. My sewer's aid is my best friend when it comes to stitching with DST, especially with binding. So all I'm going to do is just add a trail of this sewer's aid around the top edge of where I'll be stitching. That way I won't have any skip stitches or my needle won't get sticky. It actually works very well with the binding as we top stitch in this process. Of course, I'm going to move my clips out of the way, but I like to add it as I go and make it very moist on the top edge, and I guarantee you you won't have any issues when it comes to the top stitching. But that's my little secret. So let's go to the sewing machine and top stitch this binding onto the flap. Hopefully the sewer's aid did the trick for you and you were able to obtain a beautiful top stitch around the edge of the flap. I'm just going to use one of my microfiber cloths and some alcohol and clean up the edge just to get rid of that oily residue, and just make sure you test your fabric first before you use alcohol so it doesn't rub away the color of your vinyl. Okay, so once you are done here, we're going to move on to the next step. Now I'm going to orientate my flap to where the bottom edge is facing me and make your placement lines for your flap accent tabs. Now grab your 2 flap accent tabs, and what I like to do is fold the accent tab in half so I know where my center guide is, and I'm going to place the accent tab right above the marked line. So I'm going to clip that into place, and then I'm going to repeat the same on the opposite side and make sure it is aligned against the placement mark, and clip that into place. Okay, and just make sure it is straight on both front and back. With your hole puncher, you're going to punch a hole about roughly a 1/2 inch away from the pointed edge of your accent tab, and make sure that everything is going through each layer. And once you have done that, you should have a hole through and through. Now I have my 5mm rivets, and this is a preference. I really like the smaller rivets on the tab. It makes it look very posh. But I am going to install my rivets through the flap accent tabs, and we're going to set those into place. Our flap is looking good, and in the next step we're getting ready to attach it to the back panel. So we're going to add a strip of DST along the bottom edge of the flap here. Okay, let's move on to the next step. We are getting ready to work on the back panel. For this portion, you're going to need your upper back panel as well as your lower back panel. Turn your upper back panel right side facing up and orientate that panel to where the 3/8 seam allowance is at the top edge. We're going to take that upper back panel and place it right sides together with the lower back panel, and we're going to clip that into place along the top edge. Okay. Once you have finished, we're going to stitch a 3/8 seam allowance going across, making sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end. Now that you're done stitching the 2 pieces together, we're going to press open the upper back panel from the lower back panel, and we want the seam to face towards the top edge of the upper panel here. When we go to the sewing machine, we are going to top stitch along the top edge or bottom edge of the upper back panel. So we're not sewing on the lining, we are sewing on the exterior fabric only, making sure that the seam is pushed up towards the upper back panel. Your upper panel should now be top stitched. We're going to call this one piece here the back panel from this point forward. I'm going to fold my panel in half to make a center notch. And I'm going to orientate my back panel to where the upper panel is facing me, and I'm going to measure 2 1/4 inches away from the top edge, and this is going to be for my flat placement. And just draw a short line, just enough so that you can see it. And I'm also going to draw a vertical line as my crosshair so that I know where my center is. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this. All right, with our back panel, now we need to grab our flap. So I am going to remove the paper from the DST, and we're going to flip the flap over with the right side facing down onto the back panel. And I'm going to line the bottom edge up with the placement line that we just made, and I'm going to use the center line to make sure that my flap is centered onto the upper back panel portion. And once you have a good alignment, press that down and make sure that it is straight. And if you want to use your ruler and make sure that the flap is straight or parallel to the top edge of the back panel, then you should be good. Now I'm also going to double check the size and make sure that they are even on each side. So it should be 1 3/8 of an inch away from the side edge of the back panel here. And once you're happy with that placement, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance from one end of the flap down to the opposite end, making sure to back stitch at the beginning and end. Your flap is now attached to the back panel. We're going to flip that flap up towards the top edge, and we're going to give it a good press here at the folded edge near the bottom of the flap. And we're going to clip the flap onto the back panel. But before I do that, I just want to make sure that it is centered and not slanted on the sides. And once you're good or happy with that placement, clip your flap into place. All right, next we're going to top stitch across the bottom edge of the flap from one end to the other, and we're going to do a scant 3/8 of an inch. So basically that means between 3/8 and 1/4 inch. If you need help, grab your ruler, and what you're going to do is just draw a line that is 3/8 of an inch from the bottom edge. And this is going to be your guideline. So when you go to the sewing machine, you want to be right below the line you've made. That'll be your scant 3/8 of an inch. So don't sew on the line we've made. We're going to sew just about 1/8 of an inch below that line. So let's do that now. As you can see here, I top stitched just below the line that I've made, and I'm just going to clean that up with a little bit of alcohol. And then we're going to move on to attaching the back slip pocket to the back panel here. Grab both of your back slip pocket exterior and lining piece, and we're going to place the lining right sides together with the exterior and clip that into place along the top curved edge. Then at the sewing machine, we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the top curved edge as well. After we finish stitching the two pieces together, we're going to make some short snips along the curved edge here so that when we press these two pieces away from each other, they will lay or lie down flat with ease. Let's press these two pieces away from each other and place them wrong sides together and clip the top edge of the back slip pocket as you go along the curve until we reach the opposite end. Once you are done, we're going back to the sewing machine and we're going to do a top stitch along the curved edge with a 1/8 seam allowance. The top stitching is now done. If you have fabric that is sticking out, just trim that away. And now we're going to attach the back slip pocket to the back panel. So let's grab our back slip pocket and our back panel, and we're going to take our back slip pocket and place that right on top of the back panel here. Now, if you see your top stitching here showing through this lower curved edge, then I would just move the back slip pocket only up in about 1/8 of an inch. No higher than that, just 1/8 of an inch so that you can hide that top stitching. But if you don't see it at all, then I would clip it in place all around the lower bottom edge here. Then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to baste the back slip pocket onto the back panel. We're going to start at the top edge and make our way around until we reach the opposite end. Now we're going to measure 1 inch down from the top edge, and we are going to draw a short line, and we're going to do the same on the opposite side. Now grab your 20 1/4 inch piping strip, and we're going to lay the piping strip with the raw edges matching the raw edges of the back panel, and we can start roughly about 1/2 inch away from that 1 inch mark there, and we're going to clip it into place. Now as we move down towards the curved edge, we're going to make 1/8 of an inch snip right into those curves so that the piping can lay down smoothly. And as we reach the opposite curved edge, we're going to make those snips again. So what we want to do is expose the cording, and we want to cut away at least about an 1.5 inches away. So we want to have a little bit of clearance here away from the piping. So I'm just going to snip that right there at the top edge of the back slip pocket here. And after we cut that away, we're going to just make just a very short V cut so that we can angle the piping strip down to the side. So basically just a little rough cut here, just a nice little V, so that when we angle the piping strip to the right, it will sit nicely at that edge. So the reason that we cut back some of that cording is so that, one, it won't be in the seams when we sew the gusset onto the back panel and the front panel when we get to that step, and two, it'll have a nice seamless look throughout the piping strip, so you won't have a rough start at the tip of or where the piping strip is going to start. If you already made your notch, we're just going to bend that piping strip right there at that line, and we're going to clip that into place for now. So you should have something that looks like this. And then on the opposite side, I'm going to remove some of that cording again and just eyeball it and cut it right there and make my notch. And then once again, pivot that piping strip right at that line and clip it into place. We're going to go to the sewing machine and baste the piping strip onto the back panel. Before we begin, we are going to tack the side edge down so we can get that out of the way and keep it in place. So we're going to do about 1/8 of an inch stitch right there at the top edge. Then we're going to lift our presser foot up and stitch as close to the cording as possible. You can use a narrow or a cording foot, and we're going to continue that stitch all the way around the lower perimeter, and we're going to stop the basting stitch right where your piping ends, or the cording ends, I'm sorry. And then once again, lift your presser foot up, and then we're going to tack down that side edge again with the 1/8 inch stitch. Hopefully that was a breeze. Now let's trim away the ends here, and I'm just going to turn it over to trim away some of that piping strip away. Okay, so at this point we are now done with the back panel. We are now going to work on the front panel. So you will need your front slip pocket exterior as well as your lining piece. And on the wrong side of your exterior, add a scrap piece of Decoville Heavy for your magnetic snap reinforcement. You are going to install the female end, or the remaining end, of your magnetic snap to the exterior of the front slip pocket. And once you have finished installing your magnetic snap, we're going to take the lining fabric and place that right side facing down, where they are now right sides together, and we are going to clip the top edge of the front slip pocket. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance from one end to the other. Then we're going to make short snips into the curves of the fabric, about 1/8 of an inch from one end to the other. Now let's press the lining away from the exterior so that we will have the two pieces wrong sides together, and we're going to clip the top edge along that curve. Okay. And after your top edge is clipped together, we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch along the top edge of the front slip pocket. Now let's trim away these dog ears on the side of the front slip pocket so that we can have a nice clean edge. And since we're not going to baste the front slip pocket, we are going to glue the lining down onto the wrong side of the exterior piece. So just get your glue and just go around. And just press that down. And you can use your seam roller in this step to make sure everything is nice and flat. And if you have some of your lining fabric extended past the exterior piece, just trim about 1/8 of an inch away so that the only part that's showing is just the exterior slip pocket. So you don't need to cut away much, just enough where you don't see your lining fabric. Now let's turn over our front slip pocket to the wrong side facing up, and we're going to add a strip of DST along the bottom edge of the pocket here. And press that into place. Now grab your front slip pocket and we're going to measure 1 1/4 inches away from the bottom edge of the front panel. And then I'm going to draw my center line. These guidelines that you just made will be for your front slip pocket placement. I'm going to take my ruler and line that up against the side edge of my front panel, and it's going to be 1 1/8 of an inch. Remove the paper backing from the DST and carefully place your front slip pocket right up against the ruler and right above the line that you made at the bottom. And reposition your pocket if need be. Now give that a good press all the way around, and we're going to measure the opposite side to make sure that our front slip pocket is now centered and leveled evenly. And once you're happy with that, we're just going to make a 45-degree angle, if you will. It should be about 1/4 inch away from the top corner here. And we're going to do that on the opposite side. So you should have something that looks like this. And if you want to add rivets here, that's a personal preference. You can do that as well. But once you have made those two lines, we're going to start our top stitch at the top edge of that line, and we're going to go around the perimeter of the front slip pocket and we're going to stitch across the second 45-degree line that we've made on the opposite side. So let's do that now. We're now going to attach the piping strip to the front panel. So as we did with the back panel, we're going to measure 1 inch away from the top edge of the front panel and draw a line. And grab the piping strip that is 20¼ inches long. So start the piping strip about halfway above the 1 inch line here, and we are going to match the raw edges with the raw edge of the front panel and clip that into place. And as we go around the curves, make your short snips about 1/8 inch and continue clipping in place. And then we're going to repeat the same for the opposite side. As we did in the previous step, we're going to expose some of that piping. So remove some of your stitches if need be, and pull that piping strip down a bit, and we're just going to snip about about a 1.5 to a few inches down, and then pull that piping strip back over, and then make your V notch, if you will, right at the edge. Then we are going to bend that piping strip to the right, just below that line, and then we're going to clip it in place. And remember, we want a nice, beautiful curve right here at the top edge. And then we're going to repeat the same for the opposite end. And as we did in the previous step, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to tack down the top edge of the piping strip with 1/8 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to lift that presser foot up and start our stitch right next to the cording and going all the way around until we reach the opposite end. And then we're going to lift that presser foot up again, and then we're going to stitch 1/8 inch on the top edge of the opposite side. Now let's trim away the piping strips that are sticking out from the side edge here. And before we move on, let's clean up some of our markings here on the front panel. And we are now going to move on to the gusset. Now this setup that I have here is for option A. We have already done option B in the beginning of this tutorial. So for this step, we're going to learn how to put together these pieces for option A. Now, if you have used the SVG file, your cutouts have already been made for you. But if not, treat the buckle strap ends as you've done with option B. Or if you haven't done option B, follow that step and use pattern piece L to cut out your slit as well as your holes on your strap tips. So for now, I want you to put away your buckles and your strap end tips, and you should be left with your buckle strap ends and 2 of your strap keepers. I'm going to put a set aside so we can focus on one to eliminate any confusion. So with one of your buckle strap ends as well as your strap keeper, we're going to turn over the buckle strap end to the wrong side. Then we're going to measure 1.5 inches away from one bottom edge, and we're going to draw a horizontal line going across. And at that line that we just drew, we are going to place a little dab of super glue right below it. And with your strap keeper, wrong sides together, we're going to place that strap keeper right up against that line, or right below it, but right up against that line, and we're going to form a loop and bring that strap keeper over to the other side and match the edge of the opposite side of that strap keeper together. And then you should have formed your loop for your strap keeper. Then we're going to grab the remaining piece and do the same for that piece as well. So measure 1.5 inches from the bottom edge, draw a horizontal line, small stream of glue, take your strap keeper, place it wrong sides together, right below that line, bring it around to form a loop and make sure everything is placed nice and even. And now we should have 2 of our strap keepers attached to the buckle strap end. Now let's grab our 2 buckles here and fix it to where the tongue is resting on the roller. And we want the strap keeper facing away from us. So we're going to insert the top edge of the strap through the buckle and the tongue going through the slit. And we're going to match the raw edges together at the bottom edge. So these two edges will be together. So clip that in place. And then let's repeat that same step for the second buckle strap end. Then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to pull back that strap keeper to expose the top surface of the buckle strap end, and we're going to stitch a vertical line from one end to the other, making sure to go through both pieces of the fabric. And then we're going to repeat the same for the remaining buckle strap end. Your strap keeper should now be attached to the buckle strap end. And what we're going to do next is baste the bottom edge together. And we're going to repeat that for the second buckle that we have here. Your two buckles should now be complete. And don't forget to punch your holes through your strap end tips as well. Grab one of your gusset pieces and you're going to mark a line alongside the straight edge of the gusset that is 2 3/4 away from both of the short ends. And take your remaining piping strip and lay that down along the straight edge of our gusset. And we're going to start with start about a 1/2 inch or so from the top edge right at our line. And we're going to clip that in place, making sure the raw edges are aligned. And let's continue clipping until we reach the opposite end. Now, like we did in the previous step, we're going to expose some of that piping. So if you need to rip some of your seams, do that now. And we're going to trim away about 3/4 of an inch, or I'm sorry, about 1.5 inches of that cording away. And then next we're going to cut that V into our piping. Okay, and then bend the piping strip to where it's just below that line and clip it into place. Okay, and again, we want that nice natural curve there. And then let's repeat that same step on the opposite end of the piping strip. We're going to go to the sewing machine so we can baste the piping strip onto the gusset. And once again, we're going to tack down the top edge with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to continue that stitch right up against the cording all the way until we reach the opposite end. And then finishing off with the 1/8 inch seam allowance to tack down the opposite side. Your piping should now be basted onto one of your gusset pieces. Now we need to trim away the extra trim that is sticking out. So cut that along the raw edge, make sure it's flushed. And we're going to take the second gusset piece and we're going to match the straight edges together, sandwiching the piping strip between the two pieces. Let's clip those two gusset pieces together from one end down to the other. And let's make sure the ends match on each side. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from one end to the opposite end. Your piping strip should now be centered between your two gusset pieces, and we will now refer to this piece as our gusset. I want to touch a little bit on the piping strip here. Once I fold back my fabric, as you can see, none of my stitching is showing. And so if you don't get the stitches right on your first pass, You can make a few more passes just to hide those stitching, and as you can see here, I've made probably about 2 or 3 passes just so I can get as close to the piping as possible. So it's imperative that you make that happen, that way you don't see the stitching. And for example, if you pull back a little bit here, you can see that stitching. So I'm going to go back over that one more time just so I can get as close to the cording as possible. However, the end goal here is to not see that stitching at all. That is going to be the professionalism that you want to see with this bag, okay? So if you need to go back and make a few more passes, do that now. If not, we're going to move on to the next step. We're going to make a cut right above that top edge of our piping, and we're going to do that for the opposite end as well. Then we're going to apply a strip of DST along that seam right to where we made that snip. And we're going to do that on both ends, on both sides. Now that you have DST on both sides of those seams, we're going to press the gusset flat along the top edge here and remove the paper backing off of that DST and press down on that seam so it will lie flat. And do the same for the opposite side. Okay, you should have something that looks like this. And repeat that step for the opposite end. I'm going to use my seam roller and flatten that out a bit. Now take your scissors and we are going to trim away this center seam here, and we're going to cut about 1/8 of an inch away. Just make sure you don't cut your stitching. And right now this is what the wrong side of your gusset should look like, and the front side. Retrieve your 2 strap connectors because we're getting ready to place them on the gusset. As of right now, we do not have a right or a wrong side. So pick a side that you like. And we're going to add a strip of DST to both sides of the strap connectors. Now, I'm not going to do that because I prefer to use super glue. And that's just because I don't want my strap connectors to move when I stitch. So let's put these aside for now and grab your gusset. And on one short end of the gusset, I'm going to mark a line that is 1 inch away from the top short edge here. And then I'm going to flip my gusset around and do the same for the opposite side. This line is your placement mark for your strap connectors. What we're going to do next is attach the strap connector to the gusset. And we are just going to line the top edge of the strap connector with the line that we've just made. So we're going to place that right up against that line and make sure that the tip is centered with the center line for the gusset. So I'm going to turn mine over and apply my super glue just to the back side of that strap connector and carefully place that right up against the line and center that onto my gusset. I want to make sure it's straight up and down. So take your time with this step if you're doing my method here, because that glue is irreversible. Okay, then you're going to repeat the same for the remaining strap connector. And line that up right up against that line and make sure it is centered. Once you are happy with your placement, we're going to stitch the strap connector onto the gusset. So I like to map out my stitch line on my gusset just to make sure that it is even all the way around. And I'm just drawing a line that's 1/8 inch away from the edge of the strap connector. And I'm going to do that for the opposite end as well. And we want to get close to the bottom edge of the D-ring. I'm going to continue drawing this line. So here's my little trick with attaching my strap connector to my gusset. I'm going to start and end with long thread tails first, but I'm going to use a narrow foot or a zipper foot. And I'm going to stitch right along that bottom edge of where my D-ring sits so I can get close to it as possible. Then I'm going to switch my foot and use a standard presser foot. And once again, start with long thread tails and finish that stitching going around the perimeter of that strap connector. And I'm going to end with long thread tails. And then we're going to pull all the thread tails to the rear of the gusset and tie them off. Now that's completely optional, but I find that method to be a lot more helpful, and it makes the lines much more professional, and we want to keep them straight and consistent. So we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 1/8 seam allowance around the outer perimeter of the strap connector. So if you didn't struggle too much with this step, then this is what your strap connector should look like. So once again, I just use my zipper foot just to go across the bottom edge, and then I finish with the rest of the stitching. And now I'm going to turn my gusset to the wrong side and just pull back all those thread tails to the rear. And I'm just going to grab all of them and make one big old knot and tie a knot a few times, and then secure that with glue one more time before I trim away the extra threads. And do this step for the opposite end as well. Before we add a rivet, I am going to clean up my guidelines on my strap on both ends and any markings that I have that are visible behind the strap as well. We're going to install the rivet, so find a good center point on your strap connector, punch a hole through, and do that for the opposite side as well. And grab your 10 or 12 millimeter rivet and install that to your strap connector and set that into place. And once again, what you have done to one, do for the other. With your rivets set into place, they should both look like mine here. We're now getting ready to attach our buckle strap pieces to the gusset. So with your ruler, measure 4 1/4 inches away from the top short edge and make a mark there or a line. And what we do for one, we're going to do for the opposite side. So once again, find that measurement 4 1/4 from the top edge, flip your gusset around and make that same mark on the opposite side. Before we attach the buckle pieces to the gusset, this is option A here. Between option A and option B, the installation is going to be the same. If you're using option A, all you're going to do is take one of your your buckle strap ends, and it doesn't matter which side of the gusset you place it on, but you're going to take your buckle strap end and place that right below the line that you just drew, matching the raw edges to the raw edge of the gusset. And you're going to clip that into place. And then at the opposite end, you're going to once again place that buckle strap end below the line and clip that into place. And I know that there's a slant here, so we want to make sure that the buckle is straight. We don't want the buckle at an angle. It needs to be straight. So if you need help making sure that line is straight, you can actually elongate that line. So just bring it all the way out to the strap. That way you can use that as a guide to make sure that your strap end is straight from the opposite side. Okay, so for the remainder of this installation, I'm actually going to use option B, and there's no difference between the installation. All we're going to do is just do the same thing where we're going to place the butt end of the buckle strap into the edge of the gusset. And the reason that there's a gap here is because we're trying to eliminate the bulk out of the seams, okay? So if you're going with option A or option B, grab your pieces now. And I'm going to grab option B for my 2 buckle strap ends. And once again, I'm going to place that buckle right below that line I've made and clip that into place. And once again, I'm going to do the same for the opposite end. All right. We're going to flip the gusset over to the opposite side and grab your strap end tips. Take one of your strap end tips and we're going to do the same as we did with the opposite side. Line up the end or the edge of that strap tip with the edge of the gusset and clip it in place. And do the same for the opposite end. Okay. If you want to test your buckles, you can do that now at this step. And if you want to just keep them out of the way, it's okay to clip the pieces together. But just make sure that they lie flat from one end to the other. Okay? All right, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to do a base stitch on each side edge of the gusset so that we can attach the straps to the gusset. And then do the same for the opposite end. Your buckle strap should now be attached to the gusset, and if you have some fabric that is hanging over, just trim that away. Our gusset is done, and now we're going to move on to the exterior construction. Retrieve your back panel with the flap and your gusset. In this step, it might be helpful to release the buckle straps so that you can make sure that you orientate the gusset to the right side. So we're going to take the buckle strap in side and place that right sides together with the back panel here. So your buckle should be facing or touching the back panel. We're going to start at the top edge of the back panel and clip that into place. And we're going to continue clipping around the bottom edge of the back panel. Once you get to the curves here, you're going to make short snips into the curved edge. So just 1/8 of an inch. We want to lay the gusset down nice and flat. And once you reach the opposite side of the gusset, make your short snips again and continue clipping your gusset onto your back panel until you reach the opposite edge. Once your gusset is now clipped into place and it is in the right position with the buckle straps facing down towards the back panel, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from one top end all the way to the opposite end. It would be helpful to use a narrow foot for this step. Your gusset should be attached to your back panel, and if you wish to check your work, pull back some of your fabric just to see if you stitched as close to the cording as possible, because again, we want to eliminate seeing the basting stitch on our piping. So if there's some areas that you need to go back over, now's the time to do that. But if not, then we are moving on to the front panel, and we're going to attach the front panel to the opposite end of the gusset. So start with your corners and work your way around, clipping the front panel in place. And once you reach the curves, make sure that you make your 1/8 of an inch snips into the gusset. Your front panel should now be clipped to the gusset. We're going to take it back to the sewing machine and stitch a 3/8 seam allowance from one end to the other. So at this point, both your front and your back panel shall now be attached to the gusset. We're going to make a cut into the seams right where the 1-inch line is, and be sure not to cut through the stitching. So we're going to cut just a section like this away, and then we're going to make a cut on the other side of the gusset. So right now you should have a snip right at that 1-inch line on both sides of the gusset. And again, be sure not to cut through your stitching. We're going to do the same on the opposite side where we're making snips. We're going to add DST to the top edge of where we made that cut, right at that 1-inch line, and we're going to do that for each side of the gussets. So one here, one on the opposite, or the opposite side. Turn the bag around, attach the DST to the seams on the opposite end of the gusset and behind it. Okay. Flip the bag over, and we're going to do the seams on the back side. Right now you should have DST on both sides of the seams on each end of, or each side edge of the gusset on each side. So front and back, front and back. What we're going to do next is remove the paper backing and press that seam down onto the wrong side of the back or front panel, whichever side you're working with. And then the other seam is going to lie flat right on the gusset. So basically they should be spread apart and stuck down to either the back or front panel or the gusset. And we're going to do that for all of the seams front and back of the bag. And the reason that we're doing this is to eliminate the bulk when we get ready to insert our lining and when we top stitch the edge of the bag. And once you're complete, this is what your side seams should look like. Now that your side seams are flat, we're going to trim away some of the seam allowance here, and we're going to avoid cutting through where the buckles and the straps are. So we're going to cut around that. So start trimming down your seams on one end, and then we're going to curve that out so that we can avoid cutting that strap there, and then continue cutting around the bag. You can also use pinking shears as well, but this will do just fine. Okay, avoid that strap, and just keep coming up. All right, so this is what it should look like now. Again, we trimmed the seams and we avoided the straps on the side and continue to trim around the lower edge of the front panel. And then repeat that step for the back panel as well. Once you're done with that, we're going to add a strip of DST above the 1-inch line, going all the way around the bag until we make it back to the start point. All right, and give that a good press all the way around to make sure the DST is sticking to the bag. Before we move on to the next step, we're going to make short snips into the front panel along the top edge here, and they only need to be about 1/4 inch long. Now here's the fun part. We're going to see if we did a good job. At this point, it's a little too late, but hey, nevertheless, we're here. So let's turn the bag right side out. All right, so our bag is turned right side out and we need to shape it up a bit. And at this point, you can go ahead and clip your buckles or attach your buckles together on each side. And make sure that we kind of press that out a little bit. Okay. And now what we're going to do is fold down the top edge. So remove your DST paper and fold down the top edge until you reach your 1-inch line, and do that all the way around the circumference of the top edge. And if you need to clip it as you go along, that's okay too. But if you wish to press down those seams a bit, just use your pliers and give that a good press. That way it's not so bulky right there at the seams. And just do that all the way around. We are now done with the exterior portion of the bag. If you just want to go around and double check and clean up any of your threads or markings that you've made, do so now, but we're going to move on to the lining. We are working on the lining construction. So grab your zipper pocket lining and we're going to draw the zipper box for the zipper tape. If you're using a number 5 zipper tape, then draw your box a 1/2 inch wide. If you're using the number 3, then your box needs to be 3/8 of an inch wide. So I'm going to fold my zipper panel in half so that I can create a center notch. And I'm just going to draw a center line just somewhere between 1.5 inches down from the top edge. Then place your ruler 3¼ inches away from the top edge of your zipper pocket lining, and I am going to draw my 6 by 1/2 inch zipper box. And I'm just going to draw a vertical line to connect my ends. And once you are done drawing your box, draw a line down the center. And I'm just going to make a V on each end. It doesn't have to be perfect. These are just our cut lines. So you should have something that looks like this. Retrieve your back panel lining and we're going to position or place our zipper lining pocket onto the back panel, right sides together. Once again, we need to find our center. And I'm just going to use my fabric marker and just draw a short line for my center. So now measure 1¼ inches away from the top edge of your back panel lining, and we are going to place the zipper pocket lining right sides together, centered. So if you need help finding your center, I just like to use one of the guidelines on my ruler and line that up right up against the ruler. And then we're going to clip it into place. Now that your zipper pocket lining is clipped to the back panel, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch around the box that we just drew. Do not stitch inside of the box. To prevent puckering on the corners, I like to avoid stitching at the corner, so I would just do a vertical stitch, a short vertical stitch, right along those vertical lines, and then I will pick up my needle and continue stitching away from the corner edge all the way down until I reach the opposite end. So basically we're just avoiding the corners. We're not going to sew the corners, right? So let's go back to the sewing machine and stitch the lining panel or zipper pocket onto the back panel. So if you did it correctly, this is how your zipper box should look now that it is stitched onto the back panel. And we need to cut the line that's in the center as well as the V's on the side edge. Just try not to cut into your stitching if you did choose to stitch around the perimeter of the box completely. Now we're just going to add a couple of strips of DST around the perimeter of the box. This is just going to help the lining stick to the fabric. I'm using waterproof canvas, so it's a little stiff and it doesn't fold easily, but if you're using cotton woven, you can just iron around the zipper box in order for it to lay flat. But for me, I'm just going to add the DST around the perimeter of the box. Let's pull the lining through the hole that we just made so that it is going to be wrong sides together. And this is the part where the DST pretty much helps you along the way. So I'm going to remove the paper from the top edge and push that seam down right there on that DST so it can stay in place. Then I'm going to fold back that top edge to where that crease is. That should be natural. And then remove the DST from the side edge of the zipper box on both sides. And lastly, turn it over to the back and remove the paper backing from there and press that seam down onto the zipper tape and then fold the remaining lining pocket down to where the natural crease would be. Okay, so that's easy to me. I don't like fighting with fabric, so if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna make it easier on myself. But if you notice here, you see that my edges are nicely rounded. They're not puckered. They're not, doing anything except for doing what it's supposed to do. So let's put this aside for now. Retrieve your 7-inch zipper tape and apply DST to the top and bottom edge of your tape. And grab your zipper pull and install your pull onto your tape. Retrieve your back panel that has a zipper pocket lining, and we are going to center the zipper tape onto the lining here. And to help me center my tape, I drew a line that is 3/8 of an inch above the top and bottom of the zipper box. And make sure before you place your zipper tape facing down that the zipper is orientated in the direction that you wish for your zipper pocket to open. So remove your paper, the DST paper, from the top and bottom of your zipper tape, and we're going to line up the zipper in the center of the box that we drew. So when I turn it over, my zipper tape should now be nicely centered. And if you have to reposition your tape, just pull back and make those small adjustments. And once you're done, we're going to go to the sewing machine and top stitch an 1/8 seam allowance around the entire perimeter of the zipper box. Your zipper box should now be top stitched, and if you started with long thread tails, we're going to pull them to the back, but if you did not, it's perfectly okay. But if you did, we're just going to pull those thread tails to the rear, and I actually like to pull it from underneath the zipper tape so we don't have a knot showing on the actual zipper, so we can at least try to hide it. So pull those thread tails right underneath your zipper tape and tie them off as usual. Then add a bead of glue right where that knot is so it doesn't unravel over time, and trim the remaining threads away. Now we're going to take the lower edge of the zipper pocket lining and bring it up towards the top edge and clip that into place. Then we're going back to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance around all 3 sides of the zipper pocket lining. And when you get close to the zipper tape, do a few stitches here just to give it a little bit more security on both sides. Your zipper pocket lining is now complete. If you wish to trim down some of your seams, you may do so, but honestly, it's not really necessary. But I'm just going to trim away at the top edge here. Before we move on, there's a step that I forgot to mention. If you wish to add your logo, it's not too late, but you can still attach it to the back panel just below the zipper box, or if you have a tag and wish to sew it into the seams, you can do that as well. But I'm going to add my logo, and then after that we're going to attach the gusset to the back panel. I went ahead and attached my logo. Just make sure that you move the zipper pocket lining out of the way. Ask me how I know. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to draw your 1-inch line from the top edge of your front and back panel to include your gusset lining pieces. And once you have done that, we're going to turn our back panel right side facing up and grab your gusset lining piece, and we are going to treat this section like we have done with the exterior piece. So we're going to take the top edge of the lining and clip that to the top edge of the back panel here, and we're going to work our way around to the opposite side of the back panel. So I'm just going to clip that in place, and then right at your curves here, don't forget to make your short snips, and we're going to do about a 1/4 inch here because our seam allowance is going to vary in this step. And then continue clipping around your gusset. We're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch the gusset onto the back panel. However, pay close attention to how we're going to do that. You're going to start your stitch with a 3/8 of an inch stitch from the top edge. Once we reach the 1-inch line, we're going to increase that seam allowance to a 1/2 inch. Then we're going to increase it once more to 5/8 of an inch as we go around the bottom curved edge of the gusset. On the straightaway, we're going to decrease that seam allowance back to a 1/2 inch, and then we're going to finish that seam allowance with the 3/8 of an inch after we pass the 1-inch line. If you need help making sure that your stitching is consistent, you can draw your 3/8 of an inch line there, and then gradually increase your line to a 1/2 inch so that you can stay on track. And you can do the same on the opposite side. Only if this helps you. If you're good with eyeballing things, then go right on ahead. If not, welcome to my team and draw lines. All right, now let's go to the sewing machine and stitch the gusset onto the back panel. Your back panel should now be attached to your gusset. Hopefully you do not have any puckering around the curves. This is the main reason why we like to snip into the curve so that the seam can lie down flat and you don't have to worry about fighting with the fabric. So if everything looks good, we're now going to attach the front panel like we did with the back panel. Once your front panel is clipped to the gusset, we're going to go back to the sewing machine and stitch the front panel just like we did with the back panel. Both your back and front panel should now be attached to the gusset, and we're going to snip into the 1-inch seam here without cutting through your stitches, and we're going to do that for each side of the gussets, or I'm sorry, each side of the gusset. Then we're going to add the DST to the front and back of those seams on each side of the gusset, just like we did before with the exterior portion of the bag. After you have applied your DST, remove the paper from each side, and we're going to press those seams down flat up against the gusset and your back panel here, and do the same all the way around. Once your seams are now flat, we're going to trim away the remaining seam allowance from the lower portion of the bag. And don't forget to do the other side. We are now going to apply DST to the top edge of the bag right above the 1-inch line, and we're going to go around the entire perimeter of the top edge until we meet back up at the starting point. Give that a good press all the way around just to make sure the tape sticks to the fabric. And before we remove the tape, make short snips into the front panel along the curve. They only need to be about 1/4 inch long. Start by removing the paper away from the DST, and we're going to fold down the top edge of the bag. Give that a good press all the way around the top edge. And if you need to flatten those side seams, grab your flat nose pliers and just give that a good press right there at your seams. Now we need to grab the exterior portion of the bag. So remove your clips if they are still there. Then we're going to drop in our lining. So make sure the front panel is facing in the same direction as the front panel exterior. So drop in the lining and match your seams on each side and clip them into place. Then once the seams are attached, continue clipping around the front and back side of the panel. Everything should fit like a glove at this point. Once your lining is now clipped inside the exterior of the bag, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the top edge of the bag. Before we top stitch, the easiest way of doing it is laying your bag down flat onto the machine, and you're going to start your top stitching from inside the lining, and you're going to continue to rotate your bag, compressing it as you go around until you reach back at your starting point. So ensure that your tension is accurate because you want the nice top stitching to show through from the exterior portion of the bag. So you would need to have even stitching from both top and bottom. Once you have top stitched the top perimeter of your bag, we're going to pull the long thread tails through from in between the seams. So if you have a pointed awl or something that can grab the threads in between those seams, then use that, but reach in right where those seams start and end and just pull up a little bit so that you can grab them. And gather your threads, and we're just going to tie a few knots and tie them real tightly, and then trim the extra threads away, and we're going to tuck those remaining threads in between the seams once more. And you can add a little bit of glue right where you've placed those seams and just give that a good press. And we're now done with the exterior portion of the bag. The next step is making the crossbody strap. We're getting ready to wrap things up, so what you need in front of you are your 2 crossbody straps. And if you haven't done so already, fold the long edges inwards towards the center line, and we're going to do that for both pieces. Then you're going to fold the strap in half lengthwise and clip it into place. And make sure that you do the same for your remaining strap. Now, before we move on, in our next step, we're going to be transferring some marks onto our straps. But before we do that, I want you to pay special attention to the way that the strap is. So you need to identify which side is going to be the wrong side and the right side. So let's just say, for instance, this is going to be the right side of my strap and the folded edges are visible. Then with your second strap, you want to make sure that it's consistent. So you want the folded edges to essentially be all as one, or look like it's one strap. because one of the straps is going to be orientated in a different direction. So when we're transferring the marks, just pay attention to which side is going to be the right side and the wrong side. So what's going to help me is I'm going to write right side on the side of the strap that I want the folded or the non-folded edge to be. And then on the second strap, I'm also going to put right side so that I know that this is going to be the right side of my strap. So when the strap comes together, it's cohesive. So the folded edges are on the same side. And the opposite is true for the other side. So hopefully that wasn't confusing. All I'm trying to say is basically before we transfer the marks, just make sure you know which side is what so that everything can look like one consistent strap. So for now, let's put away the short strap and we're going to focus on the longer strap here. For the longer strap, we're going to use pattern piece O as a template. And we're going to place the template on the right side of your fabric, in which that's whatever side that you chose. Before we do that, I'm going to remove one of my clips away from the top edge because I need to basically keep this in place because we're going to transfer the tip onto the fabric. And so instead of fighting with the fabric, I just added a piece of DST on the inside, and I'm just going to press that together so it can hold it in place. And then I'm going to transfer or place the template right on top of my strap, and then I'm just going to transfer the tip of that template onto my strap. And this is similar to what we've done in the previous steps with the front strap and the buckle strap tips, okay? So this is what it should look like. And now with our scissors, we are going to trim away or follow that curve that we just made. Then I'm going to round out the tip with my lighter. We're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch both of our straps, both the long and the short. And for the long version, we're going to top stitch around the tip as well. So if you want to draw a center line so you know that's your pivot point, then go ahead and do that. But we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch lengthwise along both sides of the strap for both pieces. Both of your straps should now be completely top stitched. So once again, we're just going to put away the short strap and grab pattern piece O again and line that up with the tip of your strap. And let's clip it into place for now. And then trace the punch holes onto your fabric. In this particular step, it doesn't matter if it's the wrong or the right side because we're just punching holes through each side of the fabric. And let's remove the pattern piece. And your hole should now be transferred onto your fabric. Grab your hole punch and just punch through those marks you just made. With the same strap at the opposite end, we are going to draw a line on the wrong side at 2.5 inches away. Next, grab one of your swivel hooks and one of your rivets, and we're going to feed that strap through the swivel hook and line up the bottom edge of your strap to the line we just made. And clip that into place. And with your hole punch, we're going to punch a hole somewhere in the center of the edge and the swivel hook. And once you've done that, install your rivet and secure it into place. You are now done with the adjustable strap, so let's put this aside for now. Next, we need to grab the shorter strap and pattern piece P, and we are going to place the template with the cutout towards the top edge of the strap. Don't forget which side of the strap coincides with your longer strap. So if you're not sure, just grab your strap, your longer strap for reference, and the buckle, this is going to be the buckle end. So if this is your buckle end, then both of the edges need to match. So my folded edges are facing outward, so I'm going to make sure that my template is going to be positioned in a way where my strap is going to be cohesive. With that being said, grab your leather marking pen and we're going to trace out the cutout for the buckle. And we also need to make a draw inside the rivet placement hole there. Now we need to cut out this hole. So we're going to do that like we've done before with all the other straps that we've done. All right, so I'm going to punch out the hole and I'm going to increase my hole size. So I think this one should be good. And I'm going to punch at the top and bottom of that slip. And then I'm going to cut out the fabric in the center of those two holes. And after you have made your cutout, it should look something like this. I'd like to go an extra step and edge coat the inside of my slot here, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that today. However, we're going to measure 1¼ inches away from the bottom edge of where that open slot is. And we're going to draw a vertical line there. This is going to be the placement for the strap keeper. So at this point, you are now left with two strap keepers, one that is longer than the other. And for the portion of this strap, we're going to use the shorter version. So as we have done before, add some glue right up underneath your line and take your strap keeper wrong sides together. And we're going to form a loop by matching the opposite end of that strap together. And give that a nice firm press. In the next step, we're going to stitch the strap keeper onto the strap. However, this can go one or two ways, and this is not explained in the instructions. So if you have thicker material like I do here, it would probably be best just to stitch the strap through one layer of fabric, which means that you'll just be attaching it the way that it is, the way you see it here. However, if your fabric is on the thinner side, then you would attach the strap according to the way the instructions say to do so. And so that would mean that you would install the buckle, fold back the remaining end of the strap, and then you're going to stitch through the strap keeper through all the layers of the fabric. But since my material is thick, I'm not going to do that. And so therefore, I'm just going to attach the strap keeper just to one side of the strap. So as you can see, I only stitched through the first layer of the strap for my strap keeper. Now we need to install the buckle, and the short end of that strap is going to go through, and the tongue is going to go through the slot here. And fold the fabric wrong sides together until it's about the halfway point with the buckle. And once you have a good placement, clip it in place. Next, we're going to punch a hole for the rivet. So punch through the mark that you've made earlier and set your rivet into place. And for right now, let's put this away because we're going to work on the last strap keeper that we have. Place your strap keeper wrong sides together and clip it in place. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the bottom end of the strap keeper. Once you have stitched the strap keeper together, it should look like this. And then we're going to add glue to just that edge below the stitch line. And then you're going to press that down so it's wrong sides together on the opposite end. So all I'm doing basically is forming a ring. Okay, so you want to tack that down on that edge here. And then we're going to do the same for the opposite end. Apply glue just below that stitch line and fold it back onto itself and give it a good firm press. Now we're going to turn it right side out. so it can form a ring. Now let's put that down for a second and grab the strap that has the buckle end. And on the wrong side of your strap, you're going to grab your ruler and measure 12 inches away from the bottom edge and draw your line at the top. So as of right now, you should have a line on the wrong side of the strap that has the buckle end. Next, you're going to take that same strap keeper that we were working on, and you're going to slide the strap keeper with the wrong side, with wrong sides together. So slide it up from the bottom all the way towards the top. And you're going to go just a little bit past the line that we've just made. Okay, so wrong sides together. And then we're going to add a few drops of glue right underneath that line. And then we're going to carefully pull down the strap keeper so it rests right up against that line that we just drew, and give it a nice press. And the last thing that we're going to do is take it back to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch the strap keeper into place. Your last strap keeper should now be attached, and this is what it should look like as of right now. Now we're going to take care of the free end. So back to the wrong side, we're going to measure 2.5 inches away from the bottom edge and draw your line. Grab your last remaining swivel hook to include one of your rivets, and we're going to thread the end of this strap through the swivel hook. And then we're going to fold it wrong sides together, matching up to where that line is, and clip it in place. Then we're going to use our best judgment and place a hole down the center between the end and the swivel hook. Install your rivet and secure it into place. All right, your crossbody strap is now complete, and we're going to clean up any residue that we see, any markings that are visible. Let's give that a good wipe down. And if you wish to take it a step further, you can also edge coat the raw ends of your strap, but that's completely optional. So let's put the crossbody strap together. So take the end that has the tip and orientate that strap to the side that you prefer. And again, mine is going to be the folded raw edge, or the folded edges here. And I'm going to feed it through my buckle to whatever desired length that I wish, and feed that strap through the strap keepers. Okay. And just like that, we are done. Your crossbody strap is complete, and so is the exterior of your bag. So you can go ahead and attach your strap to your Harlowe Crossbody Bag. We have made it to the end of this tutorial. Thank you all so much for hanging with me today. Hopefully this bag wasn't too difficult on you. However, if you wish to share your Harlowe bags, head on over to my Facebook group and drop your pictures there. I would love to see what you have made. And if you want to know what that group is, all of that information is located in the description box below. And if you're not a subscriber, what are you waiting for? Don't miss out on the next pattern releases. And if you don't want to subscribe, that's okay. Give me a thumbs up just to let me know you like it. And if you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down. That just lets me know that I need to do better. But until then, I will see you guys in the next tutorial. Goodbye.